Lane Kiffin is doing his best work in the transfer portal right now.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we dive into the transfer portal at the halfway point of this first window. While this year's portal may not feature names like Walter Nolan or Princely Amon-Mielen, Lane Kiffin is still doing some of his best work. He has found a way to upgrade the Ole Miss roster while building for the future. It's a masterclass of roster management. We'll also take a closer look at the quarterback position and why Ole Miss finds itself in the unique and challenging situation that it is in heading into next season. Remember, we're available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. A special ode to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is. And don't forget your second listen on the network. Chris Gordy of Locked On SEC and Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy. They offer other perspectives on college football, the SEC, and yes, even Ole Miss. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So we talk about how Lane Kiffin is doing his best work right now in the transfer portal. And I'm serious about that. It's a real thing. This year's transfer portal cycle, there's not a Princely Amon-Mielen in it. There's not a Walter Nolan in it. So people expecting Ole Miss to put names together like they did a year ago, they're only fooling themselves. But that doesn't change the fact that Ole Miss is doing some great work right now. If you look at the On3 transfer portal graphics, it's an algorithm. The teams that have improved their roster the most through the transfer portal window, Ole Miss is sitting at number 2 behind Texas Tech. They're actually solidly in number 2 right now. Again, remember, no Walter Nolan, no Princely Amon-Mielen, no Lance Hurd. All of the big money positions, they're not big name on the trenches this year. So we're still waiting to see if other names pop up. But as it sits right now, Ole Miss is doing really great jobs. Michigan is in number 3. Oregon is at number 4. LSU is at number 5 as far as teams that have improved their roster the most. This is what the transfer portal is all about. You have the high school recruiting period that ended at the beginning of December in the early signing period, and then opens the transfer portal window. It's all about finding one and supplementing the other. And we talked about how Ole Miss had roughly 50 names this season that they were going to have to replace, not including the players that left in the transfer portal, in which some cases there was some addition by subtraction in that case. But needing 50 names, Ole Miss needed to come out and do a really good job in high school recruiting and the transfer portal. This wasn't an either-or type situation. Lane Kiffin had to build his roster in both areas because of the sheer numbers of what was going on. So if you want to look over at 24/7 where Ole Miss sits right now, Ole Miss has the number 13 overall class in the entire country. For comparison's sake, last year on 24/7, Ole Miss had the number 17 class in the country. This year is a master class in roster building by Lane Kiffin. Like I said, the big names aren't there. There's no Walter Nolan, no Princely Amon-Mielen, but Ole Miss is still doing some really good work in the transfer portal, finishing ahead of SC and Oklahoma. And honestly, they're one more commit probably away from jumping ahead of Notre Dame and getting up there around Tennessee. So we'll see exactly how it goes over the next few days, few weeks, because there's about 5 weeks left in the transfer portal window until Ole Miss's drop ad date expires. I think it was like February 2nd or something like that is the absolute last day that Ole Miss can get somebody into school. And for people saying nobody's going to do that, well, Jackson Dart was there like 2 days before the final drop ad date in February, whenever he transferred in. Here's the really cool part about this. Ole Miss has brought in big players, awesome players like Caleb Odom. Caleb Odom has 3 years of eligibility left. Lane Kiffin is intense, and he is definitely trying to build his roster with multiple years of eligibility so that he can build a roster for the future. Now, he is trying to win in 2025. So do not hear me say that he is tanking 2025 for something in the future. He is trying to make the playoff, and Ole Miss is a fringe playoff contender for 2025. It all depends on Austin Simmons. It kind of depends on some trench play. When Ole Miss is trying to build their roster up, all of this is important in what goes on. But Ole Miss is trying to basically do what Tennessee did this year, to where they were a fringe team that actually was able to go 10-2 and made it into the playoff. That is what Ole Miss is trying to do this year. But these younger players with multiple years of eligibility, that is setting up 2026 to be the next elite year for Ole Miss. We talked about this all the time over the last couple of years, that Ole Miss baseball, they were on that 3-year cycle to where they'd recruit a super class, and by the time they were juniors, when they were juniors, Ole Miss was going to try and make a run in baseball. That was the way it was. Ole Miss is kind of doing something similarly now. We've seen enough of a sample size to where we can notice a little bit of a trend, to where if you look at the 2022 class, they got the Jackson Darts and those guys, and they built up to that 2024 season. Everything was built towards that, and Ole Miss built their rosters for that. After they left, 50 players, their eligibility was up. So Ole Miss had to replace them. So it looks like with the multiple year eligibilities that Ole Miss is recruiting, that they're kind of trying to do the same thing, but not necessarily at the quarterback position to where you have an Austin Simmons or an AJ Maddox. So we'll see exactly how that goes, but Lane Kiffin is doing terrific work. Now, that is not to say there aren't challenges this season. And one of the challenges that Ole Miss is going to deal with and is dealing with is finding a quarterback. Ole Miss needs a quarterback in the transfer portal, kind of in case of an emergency, break glass type guy. Ole Miss is absolutely looking for that quarterback. And they brought in Anthony Calandria for a visit. He ended up committing to UNLV because he wanted to be a starter. They brought in Mikey Keene, who ended up committing to Michigan because he wanted to be a starter. You see a theme developing here. Ole Miss brought in Bo Pribula, who went to Missouri because he wanted to be a starter. And he got $1.5 million, but that's beside the point. Ole Miss is in a unique spot because anybody that comes on campus to visit knows what Ole Miss has. These quarterbacks are not dumb. They know what's going on. So because of that, it's going to be difficult to find that transfer portal quarterback. Maybe the question might be, is AJ Maddox good enough? Do you feel good enough about him 2 years into the system to be the backup quarterback, and you just bring in a third string guy that you might get from the FCS level or something like that that doesn't necessarily matter? Is that the avenue that you have to take in the quarterback room, because it is going to be so hard to find a higher quality, higher pedigree guy because of what you have with Austin Simmons? Now, the other problem that Ole Miss has in this transfer portal window is the running back position. Ole Miss missed out on Fluff Bothwell. Ole Miss missed out on Justice Haynes. They did get Kewan Lacey. Good for them for that. But those two players, and you absolutely know that other schools are negative recruiting Ole Miss over what happened with Ulysses Bentley this year. Ole Miss's running back situation is being negatively recruited for Ole Miss by everybody that is trying to get a running back. Everybody is pointing to Ulysses Bentley, for better or for worse. I'm not saying it was right. I'm not saying it was wrong. I'm just saying it's happening. So Ole Miss has to over-recruit that, and people are going to ask for more money because of that. You don't get the benefit of the doubt that, say, wide receivers get at Ole Miss. You don't get the benefit of the doubt that quarterbacks get at Ole Miss or defensive players. Ole Miss is being treated a little bit at a lesser level in running back and needing more NIL to get that player because of what happened last season, in my opinion. So that's something that everybody needs to keep an eye on, and we'll see exactly how it goes for the Rebels in this offseason. Ole Miss takes on Duke in the Gator Bowl January 2nd. You know, they're looking for their 10th win in 3 of the last 4 years. Is this the Rebels' introduction to Logan Diggs? Can Jackson Dart cap off his record-breaking career with a final win? And how will the young Rebels factor in? We've got the keys to victory up next. Don't miss it. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it is not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many different ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. I mean, it's thrilling. How about checking out the college football playoff lines where you can get Texas at minus 13.5? Just visit FanDuel.com today to join. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So let's look at keys to victory for Ole Miss against the Duke Blue Devils. This is really fun. You know, we do this every week. This is normally our Tuesday show, but since Ole Miss is playing on Thursday and everything's going on, we have to adjust a little bit. We have Kenton Gibbs coming on. He's going to do a little bit of a crossover from the Duke Blue Devils perspective in the beginning of next week as we get into game week as well. The keys in this game, it will be all about the Penn State game plan offensively from 2023 against Duke. Why? Manny Diaz was the defensive coordinator of Penn State in 2023. That defense was largely shaped around Manny Diaz. He's brought that same plan to the Duke Blue Devils. So a lot of the stuff that Ole Miss worked, and that worked against the Penn State Nittany Lions, should work against the Duke Blue Devils with a little bit of a talent lessening from the Blue Devils. Now, when you look at what's going on offense against Duke's defense, it's going to be a little bit of a work in progress, and Jackson Dart is trying to break basically his last record at Ole Miss. He is the single game passing leader. He is the career passing leader. He is going for the single season. He needs about 170 yards to do it. I think he's going to make it. I think he's going to make it fairly early, but that Duke defense will show a blueprint of what Penn State did the year before. The difference in this game that Ole Miss did not have in that Penn State game is Ole Miss is struggling to run the football. It will be a big case for Ulysses Bentley. And can Logan Diggs provide more of a running game than other players? Everybody's been waiting to see what Logan Diggs can do. He is about a year at that point away from tearing his ACL. We all know that the ACL injury is about an 18-month injury to be completely right. You can play at 9 months, but to be completely right, it takes a little bit more time to get the explosion back and stuff like that. Will Logan Diggs have a little bit of that explosion to carry the mail a little bit for the Ole Miss Rebels? And also the defensive returners for 2025. That is the Mississippi defensive linemen, Suntaran Perkins, TJ Daugherty, those guys, Chris Graves. They need to show out in that Gator Bowl. If you need film on tape of what that team can be, this Gator Bowl is going to be really important for Ole Miss. We'll see exactly how it goes, okay? When you look at the fact that Logan Diggs is coming back, that is a potentially huge thing. And we talk about the transfer portal, and we've been talking about the transfer portal for essentially the last 3 weeks. Logan Diggs in this Gator Bowl, especially on an Ole Miss team that apparently does not do spring games. They do very lightweight practices, and they do kinder, gentler falls. But so there's not a lot of film to determine whether or not a player is what it needs to be. I think it's going to be important for Logan Diggs to play in this Gator Bowl, at least some, 5-10 carries to see what he looks like. because Ole Miss needs to make a decision over the next 3 weeks, over the next 4 weeks, whether or not they're going to bring in other running backs. Like if they're planning on bringing in one because they are assuming Logan Diggs is going to be okay, do they need to bring in 2? That's what I mean. So this is an opportunity to put some film on tape. Now, I realize that practice-wise, they're videotaping everything, and Logan Diggs has been practicing. But this is the only opportunity that Logan Diggs is likely going to have for live reps before the season opener against Georgia State next year. I think it will be important to see exactly what it looks like. And Duke, they do a fantastic job at tackles for loss and playing behind the line of scrimmage. They are pretty good at making explosive plays. So there's a lot of questions that can be answered in this game if you're willing to do it. Now, I understand that a lot of the upperclassmen, this is their last game, and this is the chance for like Jackson Dart to break that record and all of that. And that is fine. I hope they get it. I hope they get it early. What I am talking about is the younger players coming in, the Logan Diggs, seeing what he looks like for 2025, moving Jaden Williams or Diego Pounds over to the right side to protect Austin Simmons' blind side against the team that gets after the quarterback. How can he do in that situation? Not all offensive linemen can block left and right. In the NFL, they have to, because the roster size is 54 players or something like that. In college, that isn't necessarily the case because the roster size is 105 players. So you can't absolutely guarantee that a player having to reverse everything about their technique is going to work out. Ole Miss needs to find out if Diego Pounds or Jaden Williams are naturals in that role, or if Ole Miss has to go out in the transfer portal in the next couple of weeks and find another tackle. Tackles are in that position that's a little bit difficult. You're overpaying for players that may not be that good. Same is happening with defensive tackles. You're overpaying for players that may not be that good. At this point, Ole Miss is waiting to see if that player gets into the portal that has a number that matches what they're expecting on the defensive line position. So we'll see how it works. This year's transfer portal is very weird because this is the first year of red share as well. So it's just inflated the numbers like crazy because of what players think they're worth. I mean, Jackson Arnold, $2.5 million. Lenore Sellers, $2.5 million. Eric Singleton, I should say, not Malachi Singleton, Eric Singleton. Eric Singleton, like $1.7 million. We're talking large numbers for the upper crust of the transfer portal, which is not as good as it was a year ago. I mean, that's absolutely true at this point. You're still improving your roster and you're doing a lot of work, and Lane Kiffin is absolutely doing yeoman's work, but a lot of that has to do with that. This game would go a long way for showing Ole Miss what they need to do over the course of the rest of January and into the spring signing period for high school and for the spring transfer portal window, which I am a firm believer that 95% of your roster is built in the early transfer portal and the early signing day. Everything else is just adding on. You're just getting lottery tickets. You're just hoping some stuff works. So if you have some holes to where you need something to work in those later windows, that's a problem. That's a real problem. So we'll see exactly what goes on. Now, we won't know that much over the course of the portal window or the portal cycle because spring football, we don't see much. They don't do much. The spring game's a joke. I mean, nothing's going on. So, leading into the fall season, we're going to have a lot of unknowns. And that's okay. That's fine. We did that a year ago. It was fine. But we'll see exactly how that goes. Ole Miss is going to play Duke. This is a game that Ole Miss should win and win fairly comfortably because Duke is on their third string quarterback. And with Ole Miss's defense and a lot of those players playing, I think it's important for Ole Miss to go out there and shut them down, to be the stars that we think they are. If Ole Miss can do that and get the young players on the field and let them perform, the Jam Browns, the Xavion Harrises, the Cam Franklins, those younger players, Suntaran Perkins, they can just be a terror on that defensive line. That'll let the coaching staff know what they need to do in the transfer portal. I think this film is very important for Ole Miss. So we'll see how it goes. Coming up in our final segment, we're going to break down the SEC Bowl team lines and how each sets up over the next 7 days, which team is going to seize that momentum heading into 2025, plus the must-watch games you don't want to miss. Stick around for that. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it easy to track them on down. It is like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you find and cancel those unwanted subscriptions and monitor your spending while helping lower your bills so you can grow that savings as well. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to about $740 a year when they use all the app's premium features. For me, the best feature is the subscription tracker. All subscription servers just want you to forget about it. I have used it. The cancel services I was not using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every single month. Cancel that unwanted subscription every year and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, so let's talk about a little bit what's going on in bowl week this week. These are the bowl games for the SEC teams this week. We are not going to talk about the two playoff teams, Texas and Georgia. We're going to talk about them next week some, so I didn't want to use those. But these are the other 8 games involving Southeastern Conference teams this week. We're going to start out with Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is a 2.5-point favorite over Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt being an underdog is like the normal setting this season. This should be a great game. It's two teams with remarkably similar styles. The Birmingham Bowl actually got a pretty good one here. Vanderbilt's going to travel extremely well. Both teams are about 2.5 hours away from Birmingham. It should be a really fun game of two teams that actually do have some history playing each other. Georgia Tech in that situation, I think they might win, but they've had some opt-outs in the game that would be interesting. Diego Pavia being back for the Vanderbilt Commodores for this game and into next year, I think they're going to be unbelievably up for it. So we'll see how it goes in the game. Arkansas is favored by 1.5 over Texas Tech. Arkansas has had a ton of players hit the transfer portal. I do not know about that line. Texas Tech is a busy buyer essentially in the transfer portal market as well right now. So that could be weird in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, how that gets done. Taylor Green, Braylon Russell, those guys as well. Texas A&M is a 3.5-point favorite versus USC. USC is Charmin extra soft. That's what Lincoln Riley's teams are. Just unbelievably soft teams. Texas A&M is a very physical team. Will Marcel Reed be able to kind of have his way in that game? I think so. We'll see how that goes. The Texas Tech running game could be a little bit healthier for this football game than they were against the Texas Longhorns. Iowa is playing Missouri. Missouri's favored by 2.5 points in the Music City Bowl. This is no offense versus a pretty good football team. Not a great team, but a good team. Elijah Drinkwitz has them kind of going right now. We'll see how it goes in this game. Last year, Iowa played Tennessee. Tennessee kind of curb stomped them a little bit. Iowa defensively is pretty good. Missouri runs that kind of stretch zone offense, zone running offense. So we'll see how it looks. Missouri's a 2.5-point favorite in that game. Alabama's favored by 12.5 points over Michigan. This is a rematch of the national championship game last year. It's in the ReliaQuest Bowl in Tampa, Florida. On New Year's Eve, Alabama's a 12.5-point favorite in that game. The way it's set up, the injuries that both sides has, I think Alabama's defense is going to be enough to kind of slow down Michigan. Michigan's had some opt-outs on the defensive side of the ball, but Alabama needs explosive plays to score touchdowns this year. That's the way this has worked. Jalen Milroe, he is kind of a skeleton key if you want to look at it. He is somebody that can just fit in and make every situation a little bit better because of his extreme athletic gifts. But Alabama has shown this year the need to have explosive plays to score touchdowns. Will Michigan give up explosives in that game, or will it be a low-scoring game? I will be interested, but, looking at this game, you kind of look at Michigan and say they might cover that game. South Carolina is favored by 9.5 over Illinois. South Carolina is probably the hottest team in the Southeastern Conference right now. Illinois is quarterbacked by Luke Altmaier. This is the Citrus Bowl in Orlando, Florida. Should be a lot of fun to watch. It's on December 31st as well. I think that game is the lead-in for the playoff games in the quarterfinals. Baylor's favored by 1.5 over LSU. This game, I just don't know. I don't know. I have not seen Baylor this year. I think their quarterback is Sawyer Robertson. That's like a kid that was signed by Mike Leach to play quarterback at Mississippi State. LSU, they're just problematic on the defensive side of the ball, and they're so up and down. We'll see how that looks. And Ole Miss is favored by 14.5 points. The biggest line in the SEC is by Ole Miss over Duke, and that is because Duke is going to be without their starting quarterback in this game. They're going to be actually relegated to their third-string quarterback in this game. Again, Jackson Dart's like 170 yards from the single-season passing record. The young players want to get into the game. We'll see how it goes as well. The over-under in this game is at 52.5 points. That's interesting. That's probably like a 38-14 type game set up. And I mean, that doesn't change the spread, but that's probably what the over-under is thinking about. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Should be a lot of fun. We're going to talk more and more about the Gator Bowl as it gets closer. We're about 7 days away, or yesterday it was 7 days away. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Under Armour week. Starting Sunday, I will be at Under Armour, and I think Monday and Tuesday I will be there as well, looking at some of the practices, meeting up with Brian Smith, and doing all the stuff at Under Armour that I just really, really like to do. I like going to the media day because it's like just waiting around for like one interview and something like that, and you get to talk to a lot of people and all that. It's pretty cool. And with my background being at Rivals way back when, it's kind of fun. It's kind of a comfort zone thing. I didn't realize it was that much of a comfort zone, so I started going to Under Armour every single year. It's a ton of fun. It really is. Anyway, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC Podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. The Ole Miss Morning Show, we pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number one podcast out there. Your support means the world to us. Hope everybody has a great day, great weekend. Hotty toddy, everybody.